you keep going back to rights, which is interesting to me, because I don't think of politics primarily through a lens of rights, but you do. You keep going back to rights, and you say these fundamental rights to do whatever I want with my body in these circumstances or whatever. So, okay, if we're talking about rights.
Hello everyone, I have a video from Michael where he's approached with this liberal and the way it develops and wrap up is shocking. Well, I'll be offering my perspective as we watch, so let's jump in.
Are all rights equal? Are all rights on this, my right to have this pink fruity drink here, is that the same as your right to, I don't know, drive a car or something? No.
I don't believe they're all equal, no.
Okay, so then there are gradations of rights. Some are more important than others. Is there one most important right that you would call it a fundamental right, the fundamental right?
The right to your body and the right to decide what happens to your body.
There's no right that precedes it?
I mean, it depends. What rights do you think precede that, please?
Well, it would seem to me that the right to your body, the right to do certain things to your body, must necessarily be preceded by the right to life, without which you would not have your body or the ability to do anything at all.
Well, and as I've described, your right to life does not get to supersede or override someone else's right to bodily autonomy.
But I thought we just admitted that it did, because I thought we just agreed. Oh, you didn't agree with me. Okay, because it seems to me if we're going to have any rights at all, the right to drink my fruity drink, the right to have a lovely conversation in this kind of black room here, any of these other rights, that all of those rights depend upon the right to life, which is not just one right among many, but it is the fundamental right. And so therefore, if rights are to have any meaning at all, the right to life must supersede all of the other ones.
And I disagree.
Imagine an America without religion, a country where the guiding principles of faith, which have shaped much of its moral and ethical framework, no longer hold sway. Just imagine, in such a society, every individual operates based on their own personal moral code, and the very foundation that has long helped to define right from wrong is fragmented into countless subjective viewpoints. Ladies and gentlemen, when we throw away God, everything turns into chaos. I mean, how many young people today are heavily influenced by media outlets? It's very shocking, ladies and gentlemen. Social media platforms and ideologies that often promote a one-sided narrative. How sad is that? Rather than encouraging independent thought, these sources frequently present a narrow, filtered version of reality. And ultimately, many kids are observing these messages without questioning their accuracy or even motives. How sad. How sad.
I think you have a right to life, but your right to life does not override someone's right to bodily autonomy.
Well, you're saying that, but why is that true?
Because as I've asked you quite a few times now, you cannot describe to me one instance, except motherhood, where it is acceptable for you to use someone's...
Agree. Motherhood's unique, but I'm just saying, you are saying that the right to do whatever you want with your body supersedes the right to life. It's more fundamental than the right to life. And I explained to you why I think that the right to life is fundamental and more important than all those other rights. And I gave you, maybe you don't like my argument or something, but I think I at least spelled it out in a way that's fairly clear and logical. So what is your argument as to why the right to control your own body is more fundamental than the right to life?
Because I think that if you allow the government to decide that someone else's right to life can override your right to bodily autonomy, that is opening the door for a lot of terrifying things to happen. This is why you have to volunteer to be an organ donor. This is why you have to volunteer to be a blood donor, things like that. If we allowed the government to say that someone else's right to life can supersede your right to your body, that is a pretty terrifying amount of power to give to the government.
No, but we're speaking about, I mean, you're talking about organ donations, but we're speaking about this unique case, right? Because...
No, we're talking about the use of your body.
Right. But for instance, Bronte, I have kidneys. I don't
Good for
need.
you.
I don't need both of my kidneys. Maybe I do to filter all these terrible things I put into my body, but I don't really need both of them. I could give them to someone else. But it would be wrong if the government came in and said, Michael, we're taking your kidney now because Bronte needs it. I might give it to you voluntarily, but I certainly wouldn't want someone coming in gunpoint taking my kidney away. That would be wrong. Even if you were in dire straits, I wouldn't. I still might give it to you, but I don't want someone taking it from me. And I don't think that I have an obligation to give you my kidney.
Right.
Because my kidney is for filtering my blood. That's what it's for.
Right.
In the same way, a woman's womb is for nurturing a child. That is the telos, that is the purpose of the womb. It serves no other purpose. So I don't think that the analogy that you're making here is apt. I think, once again, it gets back to the unique status of motherhood.
So the same thing can be said for your liver, right? Your liver.
Well, no one wants my liver. I promise you.
Well, but your liver, the purpose of your liver is to detoxify your blood. It can process alcohol, it can process all kinds of toxins. But if I don't ingest those toxins, then my liver doesn't have to do that job. If I don't choose to harbor a fetus, my uterus doesn't have to harbor that fetus. Just because your body can do something doesn't mean that you should be compelled for it to do something.
If you choose not to have a drink, then your liver is not going to process alcohol. There's no way the alcohol got in there. But if you decide after, I don't know, you had a crazy weekend, you went out here to Nashville, met a nice guy. You would never do this, but I'm saying, women of ill repute would go out and, they meet a guy. He's not so nice. Anyway, the next morning she finds out she's pregnant. Really, 4 weeks later she would find out. But it'd be very fast. But mothers know, And anyway, she finds out she's pregnant. She says, oh, darn, I don't want to be pregnant. And, that baby has no right to be in my womb. Mm-hmm. She has engaged in behavior that would introduce the baby into her womb in the way that if you put the drink down, you will not be introducing alcohol to your liver. So
should we then deny health care to alcoholics because they partook in behaviors that cause them to have liver failure?
No,
should we deny smokers access to medical care because they partook in behaviors that damaged their lungs?
No.
No, but you believe that...
We shouldn't kill them, though. I don't think we should kill them, or steal their livers or anything like that. Just
like
I don't think we should go in and kill the baby just because the.
But you are saying that you get to judge someone based off of their behaviors, and because of those behaviors, and because of those behaviors, you believe that they should be denied access to health care in order to address the effects of those behaviors. And not if it's a drinker, not if it's a smoker, but if it's a woman, then sure, now we get to remove the right to her body and the effects of her behavior.
No, well, and I guess we're again missing the point. I don't think a mother ever has the right to kill her child in any circumstances. So I'm not suggesting that we single mothers out here or that it'd be very judgmental or anything like that or deny anybody health care. I just don't think that killing a baby is ever health care. I think that's a euphemism.
And that's where you're wrong.
As you kind of admitted at the top.
No, that's where you're wrong.
When we talk about the distinction between babies and fetuses.
See, and that's where you're wrong, though, because when we've talked about maternal mortality rates, we've talked about the number one cause of death for pregnant people is homicide.
Maternal mortality is still very low, by the way.
Right. Do you know the amount of people who do you know the difference between maternal mortality and maternal morbidity?
No.
Okay.
Enlighten me.
The world may reject truth, but we must remain steadfast in our commitment to it. Telling the truth is not an act of hatred. No, but it's an act of courage and faith. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we must speak truth in love, not to harm, but to bring understanding and healing and light to the darkness. This is the inevitable result when emotion clash with logic. Logic will always prevail in the end. However, emotions, being driven by deep feelings and personal attachments, often resist the rational truth. Sanity. Emotions, by their very nature, can cloud judgment and lead us to act impulsively or even sometimes irrationally. Literally. Ladies and gentlemen, when we allow emotions to guide our decision making, they can override our ability to think clearly and assess situations logically. Literally.
So morbidity is essentially unforeseen or serious health effects of a medical condition. So maternal morbidity is when someone experiences severe complications of pregnancy and labor. And I know that you think that 700 to 800 women dying annually from pregnancy is too low for you to care. But
we should bring the number down, but we shouldn't kill 850,000 babies to pretend to resolve that.
So 60,000 people every year have serious maternal morbidity, which means there's certain codes that they use, and like insurance codes that they use to determine whether or not you experienced a severe side effect. And some of those codes are having an ICU admission or needing multiple blood transfusions, things like that. And 60,000 women every year are admitted into the ICU or need blood transfusions, what have you.
That's the full definition of a severe comorbidity?
There's, I think,
we're talking about
10
ICU,
or
are we talking about certain things that are less severe?
It's severe.
What would be some of the other examples?
So it depends, because it can be sepsis, hemorrhage, I think pulmonary embolism. There's multitudes of different complications that can
We're not talking about
classified.
something like tearing or something like that.
No, that's minor, and that's not included in 60,000. So that's my point, is 60,000 women every year experience severe morbidity, and that's not including the women who just develop things like diabetes or have a perineal tear.
Oh, well, that's actually a very important point that you bring up of some of these problems that go along with pregnancy, because something that the abortion advocates mention that often is not addressed by the pro-life movement, not that I think it needs to be, but it's interesting nonetheless, is that the United States is not the best when it comes to maternal mortality. We're not the worst, but we're not the best, and there are lots of problems with it. But the reason for that, of course, is not because of any conspiracy among the doctors or misogyny or anything like that, I don't think. I think it probably has more to do with America's disproportionate rates of obesity and heart disease and diabetes. You look especially, it's not as though complications of pregnancy are the same across all demographics. It's largely concentrated in black women. And the reason for that, it would seem to me, is that black women are much more likely to be obese and to have heart problems and to have diabetes and all those things that do factor into pregnancy problems. But that's not again, I don't think any of that is a good argument to kill a bunch of babies every single year. But that seems like a health issue that should be addressed elsewhere, right?
In a godly society, this dynamic is even more evident. People spiritually disconnected from the truth of God can become blinded by their own emotions and worldly perspectives. Ladies and gentlemen, the absence of a strong moral foundation rooted in faith leads to a hardening of the heart. Without the guidance of God's wisdom and understanding, individuals become increasingly resistant to the truth, unable to see beyond their own emotions and biases. The heart grows hardened when it is not softened by the transformative power of God's word and God's love. You see? And this leads to spiritual blindness. It leads to spiritual blindness. In a society, individuals may become more consumed by their feelings, whether anger, fear, desires, rather than seeking clarity and wisdom that only logic and truth can provide. In summary, preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ is an incredibly worthwhile mission. It brings about transformation, fosters love, justice, hope, truth, and fulfills God's command. It grants eternal significance, ladies and gentlemen, and deep joy to those who embrace it. Ultimately, it's the greatest gift we can offer. You see, bringing lasting change to individuals and communities alike, and reflecting God's love and purpose for the world. So, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to click on the next one, and don't forget to like, to comment, and to subscribe. I will see you next time. Bye bye for now.